What is going on, everyone? It is Tyler McKinney back here again, and today we're going to get back into the XFL. If it's your first time here, glad to have you. If you're a return viewer, thanks for coming back and thanks for watching more videos. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. Now, I want to take a moment and just remind you that I do have the poll out there to help me choose which team I should cover for this college football season. Now, remember, the first poll is just picking which team the conference should which conference the team should come from. And then the second poll that I'm going to be putting up later this week will be then all of the teams in that conference and what team it should be. Now, probably I'm going to put just kind of a cap on this. I don't really want to cover kind of the big dogs and things of that nature. I kind of want to stay away from some of those top 5 teams and some like that. I kind of want to get to some of those more intriguing teams, some of those other teams, but we'll see what happens with it. I just let me know your feedback and make sure to hit up that poll. Now, let's go ahead and look into the XFL rumor mill, what's going on with players and things like that. So first and foremost, we had Johnny Manziel. They asked him about the XFL. Are you going to play in the XFL? What's going on? And he said, which it makes sense. He said, listen, I think The Rock is going to bring back the XFL. He pretty much, what he says is that The Rock, everything he touches turns to gold. He's going to be just fine. The XFL is going to do good. And he comes out and says, listen, guys, I'm retired. I'm not coming back. So all you guys who are wanting Johnny Manziel, Johnny Football to come and play in the XFL, it just isn't going to happen. He's moved on past football, and it looks like that's the case. I don't see him playing any more football. And that's just kind of where we're at on that situation and that with it. So, sorry to all you guys who are big Johnny Football fans and want to see him back out on the field, but I think that this is good. It probably closes that closes that chapter and that whole thought of the XFL being a place for Johnny Manziel and bringing in that kind of star power with it. It just never made sense, and he wasn't the type of player for them. And two, I don't think where he was at with all of the situations with him that he was a good place for them anyways. Now, there is some other things that I do want to talk about, and they're about players, former players, and both of them actually end up, used to be both former BattleHawks, and talking about Kenny Robinson Jr., and then we'll talk about Jordan Ta'amu. Now, Kenny, it looks like he just got released, and so, looking at it with him, he was a 5th round pick. It doesn't look like he's going to pan out with it, but I don't know. It's usually the practice squad is usually reserved a lot of times for those kind of running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers, usually a lot of those types that can, either run offenses that they need to practice against, or they're guys that they're really, really high on with that. With him being a 5th round pick, and I don't see them picking him up in a practice squad option. Now, could he get picked up by another team? Yes. And the reality of it is that I think that he really he's an uber talented guy. He's got talent and athleticism, just loads of it. But I think he really needs to find the best place for him to be there, and he's a really good ball hawker. He can read the offense very well. He can read the quarterback very well. He does a really good job back there as a safety. I think sometimes he relies too much on his athleticism. I think he will jump the gun sometimes and gets himself in trouble that way. However, I think that he might get another shot in the NFL. So when it comes to that type of a thing, I could see some other teams signing him, checking him out, and going from there. I mean, for the guy to be a 5th round pick like that and to do that, it is, I say that there's still, ample opportunities for him out there in the NFL. So we'll see where that goes and where that happens. Now, talking about Jordan Ta'amu. Now, what happened is He got signed by the Chiefs, and then the Chiefs went back and they signed their backup quarterback, Matt Moore, and it kind of showed you kind of where they were going with it. And the reports out there were that he didn't have such a great, preseason, workouts and training camp and things like that. So that would kind of make sense. Now, with him, all of you guys are kind of getting excited. We can getting back on the BattleHawks, especially all you out there in St. Louis. However, I don't know if that's going to be the case because he's not a guy that they're necessarily want to keep on the main roster, but he could be one of these guys that they sign to the practice squad. And here's where the practice squad really comes into play. And, I talk about this a lot. It really has to come down to a point, into a place, what's going to benefit a player more, being on a practice squad or being on an XFL roster and playing games. And right now, just being in the NFL atmosphere is better than being on, an XFL squad and playing, games and stuff. Now, I don't necessarily know if the whole, Chiefs system is really right for him. I don't know if that's the style of offense where he's going to be in and thrive. I don't know if he really connected with the coaches. A lot of that chemistry has to be there and fitting into a place. And we saw that a lot with the XFL. That was one of the things that really, really stood out to me through watching the games and seeing all of the interactions on the sideline, watching all of this stuff, is that there's more to it than just a guy being a good quarterback. When it comes to, gameplay, playing football, that there's a lot more going on there. And obviously we've always known that. But you really need to fit into a system and fit into the philosophy, and everything really needs to gel for things to really come together. And he might just not be a good fit there in Kansas City. And I get a feeling he's probably going to get some other shots and opportunities if he doesn't get signed to the practice squad. Some other team's going to pick him up, they're going to look at him, and then, possibly put him on their practice squad. So I don't think that we necessarily have him completely ready, open for the XFL. You might see here in a couple days him sign with another team or sign to a practice squad deal. The thing, like I said, is we need to get back to this idea of the XFL needs to become a better option than the practice squad. And that really lines up with a couple things. One, that the game tape has to matter. And I think that the XFL game tape does matter, and especially for the NFL teams. It showed with as many XFL guys as they signed, that they brought in, that the tape does matter, which is a good thing. But they need to bring credence to that. And that's going to take time. And that meaning, the quote-unquote quality of players and the quality of play is going to progressively get better each year as you bring in better players, as you bring in higher talent, as you bring in more, bigger names into the league. And so as you do that, your game film is going to mean more out of the XFL. The second thing, which is in the case right now is a bigger thing, is the money deal. Is that the guys who are on the practice squads, they're probably this year, I think it's going to be somewhere roughly around like I think it's like somewhere in the 20% range boost bump that they got up with the practice squad guys. And they added more practice squad guys in the new CBA that the NFL and the NFL Players Association signed this past year, which is going to make it more difficult for the XFL to pick up players. But like I said, when you got a guy like JT Barrett who made, $130,000 last year as a quarterback on a practice squad, if you can get him that kind of money and start bringing in those high-profile running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, and trying to get that type of talent, trying to get those people in and do that, and again, you're going to have to build up your product. This is a process, and there's a lot of different factors. It's not just one thing. It's a bunch of different things that equate into one equation with that. And so as you break it down and you look at it, one of the big factors, though, is pay. If you can get the same amount of pay, but get the added benefit of playing and not can, sit higher than being on a practice squad and being around the team, learning the things like that, and that we'll see what happens, in those scenarios and that with it. But the XFL, they understood that from the get-go, and we didn't see a lot of that. That happened a lot behind the scenes, and we really don't know exactly how much some of those guys who were the Tier 1 quarterbacks, how much they got paid, how much more it was or less than what they would have gotten paid if they'd have been on a practice squad. But I think if they can keep those XFL salaries about at or above where the NFL practice squad salaries are, I think they could do a lot of things with it. And remember, too, it's not just apples to apples. It really is an apples to oranges type of a thing, because the XFL is really, again, looking, if we haven't heard anything about a 2021 season, when they would play it, when they would. But if they keep the same timeline, or at least the same, amount of time, they were asking guys for 6 months. They're not asking guys for a year. They're not asking, for a lot with that. They were asking for a 6-month time period. And by the time they were done with their XFL contracts, they could have easily transitioned. Granted, they'd have been possibly a little bit behind the ball, but they could easily transition to an NFL squad and things like that. I think that it's a good situation there. And too, so if you're thinking about it, with the NFL practice squad, that's what you're getting paid for the year. Why? Well, they only work X amount. I get it. They only work about X amount of days. But when you're at the NFL, there's no higher league you can go to make more money. And if you're on an NFL contract, you're not going to go down and have an XFL contract. That's just not the way things are right now. But if you have an XFL contract, you've got that money, and you're going to make that money, and and then you play throughout the whole XFL year, you get your XFL money, and then you can sign an NFL deal and get the NFL deal on top of it. So really, the XFL money is for about 6 months. So if you do want to do that, so a guy gets paid in the XFL, like they were saying, average of $55,000 to $60,000, you're looking at if you were doing it for the full year, $110,000 to $120,000. So when you look at it like that, it is things aren't